I just stuck a picture on my Facebook news feed of the #1 entry in Google asking how much genetic mutation occurs in one human in one day. And the very first heading gave me the clue that I was looking at. No, I'm not a scientist, but it gave me the clue that I was looking at to support the things that I want to say. Trillions and trillions of genetic mutations occur in every single one of us every single day. And simple things like photons, light, that is, daylight, sunlight, not just ultraviolet radiation or infrared or whatever you want to call it, but ordinary light causes changes in our DNA constantly. I believe that our DNA is, in actual fact, in constant flux and flow. I believe that our DNA is in constant flux and flow. I believe that every cells and every connection, every magnetic connection between every cell is in constant flux and flow. Do you remember at university when you studied the anatomy and physiology of the cell, that it said that basically the skin of the cell was a bilipid layer? It was nothing more than a layer of lipids or oils, fats. And because the cytoplasm is mainly water, it's a juice, whatever the juice is, the bilipid layer holds the cytoplasm within it. But all it takes, therefore, is the right electricity, the right radiation to make a hole in the cell wall. It's not like it's set in stone to be there. All it would take are the right circumstances, the right electrical input to change the shape of the bilipid layer, to change the way those lipids, the individual lipids, line up. It's only their connections with one another, the magnetism between the lipids, the individual lipids, and the magnetism between each individual lipid with each other individual lipid, and the magnetism between those individual lipids and the cytoplasm, which holds the cell as a cell. I've said that clearly enough, isn't it? You remember that? Did it never occur to anybody when you were doing the courses at university to ask that particular question at that particular time about, so all it would take then is just a certain blast of a certain type of electricity in a certain shape, an electro shape, if you can create such a thing as an electro shape, to reshape cells, to reprogram cells, a certain type of vibration, and some people know what that is. Similarly with the thymus gland. Do you remember doing the lesson in anatomy and physiology about the thymus gland, about how it's kind of like shaped like a bow tie in a way, and at one end of it's like a factory. At one end of the thymus gland, it produces, or it processes, certain types of antibodies by the zillions, and at the other end of the thymus gland, it wipes out 95% of them. Otherwise, we would eat ourselves. Do you not remember being taught this? Did it not ever occur to you to ask the question, what's the point of creating all those antibodies at one side and destroying them at the other? To prove that we can? To have the confidence to know that we can fight infection if we need to? What's the point of having a gland in our system that creates zillions and zillions of big eaters at one end of the factory and kill off 95% of them at the other end? What's the point of that? I asked that question at the time. I asked that question when I was at university. In fact, I had so many questions for my lecturers that I'm sure a number of them got pretty pissed off with me. Anyway, this says something about the human being. This says something about our bodies. Okay, let's cut to the chase. Let's get to what I'm saying. Back to paradise. Let's get back to paradise. Okay. Humans were meant to live in a created paradise on Earth. Humans were meant to live in a created paradise on Earth. Humans were made to live in a created paradise on Earth. I think that because we're like naked apes, we are like naked apes, that we are not necessarily fully suited to the natural order of things. We can learn to live in and by the natural order of things, but we're not necessarily fully suited. Maybe we're aliens out of place, or maybe we're the genetic offspring of aliens out of place. Back to it, back to paradise. When I use the word paradise or paradisial, paradisical. Okay, when I use the word paradisial, what places spring to mind? What places spring to mind when I use the word paradisial to describe them? You know, places like Borneo, maybe Hawaii. I'm kind of steering that a bit. I'm suggesting that to you. Hawaii. Okay, back to paradise, back to Hawaii. Why back to Hawaii? Because I've learned a few things over the years about Hawaii and the supposed spiritual practices that come from Hawaii or are translated by scholars who've been to Hawaii. One of them is a thing called Kino Lau. Kino Lau, roughly translated, means many-bodied. It could be translated as many-covered, like Joseph in his coat of many colours. Now, why do I bring attention to this thing in Hawaiian mysticism that means many-bodied? Why do I bring that in? Well, because I saw a description. I'm going to find it. I'm going to have to buy the book again because I've given it away. I gave a lot of my books away over the years. I've actually bought books, given many of them away actually. But one of the descriptions I came across was in Serge Kahili King's book, Urban Shaman. Very interesting, in which he encourages us readers to think about this Kino Lau many-bodied thing as meaning we as individuals have resources and the power to emit our bodies as a bundle of thought forms as a force. Now, once again, what is a force? What actually is all matter? All matter is electricity. Is it not? All matter is electricity. So therefore, if we have the mind to think it, project it, design and create it, and the mind to emit it. And our genes are in constant flux and flow, as is every single part of our anatomy and physiology. And our genes are in constant flux and flow, as is every other minute submicroscopic part of our anatomy and physiology. Then do we not have the ability to be a zillion things in one moment? Do we not have the resources, abilities and talents to change the shape, to shapeshift, to literally shapeshift our way around, through everything that life could possibly throw at us? This is what I believe. Yes, I do. I'm stating this for the record. This is what I believe, and this is what I will continue to believe, even if I die of some disease. I will still continue to believe it. I will simply understand that because of the lack of belief, the lack of application, that maybe many people don't actually practice this. But who am I and what do I know? Maybe there are certain people in the world who do actually practice and apply this knowledge. Maybe there are people who are already shape-shifting their way through the thicket. Maybe there are already people who are shape-shifting their way through the thicket. I remember seeing a cartoon when I was a kiddie. It was called Zen. It wasn't exactly a shoot-'em-up, racy, fast, high-energy cartoon. I remember it to this day. It was nothing more than a cartoon man walking along from left to right on our screens. In fact, as he's walking along, he stayed sort of in the middle, to the left of the middle, actually. If we're on the screen, it would be to my left of the middle, as I'm looking at the screen, to my left, okay? To my left of the middle. He's walking along, and the background is obviously moving behind him as he's walking along. And every obstacle that comes along, he breaks into umpteen pieces, flies past them, the bits of his body forming different shapes, like there might be a leg flying along and twirling round and round as it's flying along. And then when he gets past the obstacle, he comes back together again as a whole human being with legs and arms and a head and a body, you know. I remember that to this day, and I think that's because that's a major lesson in my wizard healing practice. It's a thing that sticks with me. I've also read about a thing called the 16 Pieces of Osiris, where I don't remember the story exactly, but I've read it umpteen times. One of the places I read it was in a Murray Hope's books on Egyptian esotericism. Murray Hope, the Sirius Connection, where Osiris was slain, I think, by his brother, somebody, and they chopped him into 16 pieces. And this, I think, is a spiritual allegory, saying that many people go through life, and through certain circumstances that certain individuals experience in life, they feel like they've been taken apart or blown apart, or circumstance has cut them up, cut them into many pieces. There's a lot to be said about viewing circumstances in certain ways. I have a friend who suffered with psoriasis for a long time. He moved home and he said to me verbally that in this new place he was living in, because of the different social structure of the place and the way that the people operated and thought, he said he felt almost as if he'd been in a car crash and had come through the windscreen, and the windscreen had shattered into millions of pieces, and he was shattered because of that. It's amazing how these kinds of things can affect our physical bodies. The things we assume about our lives and circumstances and people every day can have a very specific, very powerful effect on our bodies. This is also something powerful to bring to my healing wizardry, to bring to my healing practice. I put to you that we can shapeshift according to our will and according to what we say to ourselves and what we verbally think to ourselves and what we visualize to ourselves, for ourselves, about our environments and the people that we are involved with on an everyday basis. I put to you that we are actually constantly shape-shifting. Constantly shape-shifting all the time anyway. I came across an amazing artist as well called Alex Gray. Probably some of you have heard of him and maybe even like some of his artwork. But I remember years and years ago coming across his artwork the first time, and one of his pieces that spoke to me was, I don't know if it was entitled The Healer. I do remember that one of the pieces was about the healer's path, and how on the healer's path there comes a point where the healer, the person, finds themselves shattered by certain circumstances in life. I'm hoping that in sharing the things that I've spoken about in this particular video, that I'm sharing some attitude that's going to encourage us to speak to our bodies, to communicate much more with our individual organs, organelles, cells, anatomies and physiologies. I hope that in doing so, we can return a much more detailed healing to the world, to people, and return to a paradisial world instead of a world that's dominated by some being who is looking to destroy life and turn the planet into a wasteland. Maybe Mars. The fact that some people are saying we're coming across stuff on Mars that shows that Mars was colonized at one time. Maybe it was. Maybe Mars was colonized. And maybe this world-destroying being who likes his territory to be desert, devoid of life, maybe that's him that's trying to destroy this world. And maybe our job is to heal. Are you hearing me? Okay, let's get to it then.